This could be one of the most underrated Macs of the last decade. You see, everyone remembers the 2015 MacBook Pro as a beast of its time, with its 16GB of RAM, quad-core i7s, and the fact that it was the last MacBook Pro with USB-A ports and the glowing Apple logo on the back. But let's not hang about here. The 2015 iMac has a desktop-class i7, up to 64GB of RAM, and a 27-inch display built in with a 5K resolution. 5K displays cost hundreds right now just on their own, but these iMacs are regularly available on the used market for less than the 2015 MacBook Pros go for. I got this pretty much top-spec model for £196 on eBay last week. So what's it like to use the most powerful 2015 iMac a decade after its release? Well, the CPU on board is 2015's Intel i7 6700K. The 6700K was about the most powerful consumer processor one could buy back then. It's a 4-core, 8-thread chip with a clock speed of 4 GHz, able to boost up to 4.2. That kind of clock speed is still workable these days, meaning if you were to run Windows on this computer, you'd get very playable frame rates in games like Minecraft, Fortnite, and CSGO, which are more CPU bound. I know a few people who built PCs in 2016 or 17 and are still running these chips just fine. Sometimes having just 4 cores will hold you back, and video editing isn't going to be a particularly impressive experience on the latest Adobe apps, for example. But overall, the 6700K is way ahead of its time for a 10-year-old processor. Moving on to memory now, this iMac runs 1867MHz SODIMM DDR3 modules, which are actually user replaceable using this little hatch right here. There's a button above the power connector which releases this metal cover when pressed. I've currently got 32GB installed using 8GB sticks, as this thing has 4 memory slots. I was surprised to find after I bought it though, you can upgrade these to a maximum of 64GB using 16GB sticks. There is no escaping the fact that DDR3 is a pretty outdated memory standard, but everyone had DDR3 computers back in 2015. Not everyone had 64 or even 32GB in their rig though. Suffice to say, memory usage isn't going to be a big issue anytime soon. Graphics in this iMac are a slightly more restrained affair. I have the AMD R9 M390 version, which has 2GB of video memory. In 2025, you're not going to be playing the latest games on this thing. There is a higher spec version which comes with the R9 M395, but that's still a 2GB mobile graphics card, and it's nothing to write home about. For 2015 though, no one was complaining when this thing came out. The important thing is the R9 GPUs run the 5K display absolutely fine. As long as you're not going to be playing GTA 6 when it comes out for PC, you'll have a smooth experience with whichever video card you get, since there's not a huge difference between them. The main reason Apple went with a mobile GPU instead of something desktop class like an R9 380 is likely size and consequently power constraints. The 27-inch 2015 iMac has a pretty thin aluminium body that tapers down to less than a centimetre at the edges, and it really doesn't have the space for a standard desktop build inside of it. Apple tend to design their own power supplies for this sort of thing, and the one they could fit into this space just wouldn't be able to drive a full-sized graphics card anyway. Before I talk about the incredible 5K display, let's look at storage, as it's quite an interesting story. This iMac has a Fusion drive inside, meaning there's a small 30GB or so Blade SSD on one side of the motherboard, which is used as a short-term cache. Elsewhere on the board, there's a regular 960GB SATA disk drive too. That's the long-term storage, and is where your data will spend the majority of its time. The Fusion drives inside iMacs were likely created as a way of making the system perform faster without having all of the storage swapped out for expensive SSD drives. So while the term Fusion does sound pretty good, it's a lot better to have purely SSD-based storage inside your Mac. Thankfully, this generation, which began in 2012, had screens that are relatively easy to get off so you could access the internals. It's therefore possible to swap out the Fusion drive for fully SSD-based storage. Not a lot of people know this about the iMacs of the 2010s, but the Intel processors are socketed, meaning you could actually buy an Intel i5 model and upgrade it to this i7 6700K one if you needed a bit more performance further down the line. Some say you could go even higher than the 6700K, but that's not been confirmed as far as I'm aware. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be taking this apart today as it's taking up too much space in my house and I need to sell it pretty quick. So the design is probably the most striking thing about this computer. Some would say it's the perfect layout for an all-in-one PC. I tend to agree because Apple actually went an entire decade selling Macs with this exact same design from 2012 to 2022. There are speakers built into the bottom of the display frame that fire downwards and give off immensely clear sound. There's a lot of bass for something so thin, and I'm not really sure how Apple did it. Despite it being a 10-year-old machine, there are no signs this computer's speakers haven't come from an iMac built in 2025. But of course, sound quality is just one aspect of the incredible audio-visual experience this iMac can deliver. Taking center stage is, of course, the display. It's a 27-inch IPS panel with a resolution of 5120 by 2880. It's hard to get your head around just how pixel dense a display resolution like that really is, but for comparison, the 5K display has just over 7 times the pixels that a 1080p display does, and boy does it show. It doesn't matter how hard I look at the screen, I'm just not able to discern individual pixels from one another with my naked eyes. Even zooming in with my camera takes a while to break the image down into pixels. Watching 4K 60 footage on this thing through YouTube just blows me away. There's a kind of clarity here that very few other displays across the world are capable of producing. I feel like the Catalina wallpaper was created specifically to show off the superiority of Apple's 5K iMac displays. People are going to call me an Apple shill for this video, especially the segment about the displays. The truth is though, I think there are a lot of problems with the latest Apple computers. No one should be blindly worshipping such a gargantuan, money-hungry entity. This used iMac from 10 years ago is pretty astonishing though, and it's a good reminder that these days computers can last at least a decade if they're looked after. I know this one's going to be going for a few years yet, as a videographer bought it off me just 2 days ago as of recording this video. I hope he enjoys it and gets some good use out of it, because the i7-6700K is a pretty usable chip in 2025. And so are a lot of Apple's higher-end computers from the late 2010s. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you especially to my members on Patreon. You can join the Patreon using the link in the description, and I have to say, it really helps. Feel free to join the What's on Your Screen Discord server as well, as it's a busy place to talk about Macs, old and new. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll see you next week.